Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. This is the Governmental Affairs full committee, and we have a full agenda today. I'm going to start by asking Representative Saines, Chairman Saines, to open us in prayer.
Let us bow. Dear God, we come to you in recognition of the many blessings we have and ask for your wisdom as we discern the topics that are crucial to all Georgians. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chairman Saines. We're going to start today with Senate Bill 62. So come on up, Chairman Summers. Wherever you're comfortable. Desk is fine. And understand you've got a sub to present to us. All right, if you'll read the LC number and...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. And thank you this morning for allowing me to work with the committee on the sub this morning to work through this. What we're working with is Senate Bill 62, LC number 472469S. Everybody on the same sheet? Everybody on the same sheet, okay. Mr. Chairman, what this bill is 3 years of basically, well, 2.5 to 3 years of working with here with having subcommittees, having committees during the summer off and on that we put together to study the homeless issue and what we can do to make it better and try to get something started. And we started a bill a couple years ago that started out about a half-inch thick or quarter-inch thick, and now we've wound down to a few pages that we're trying to move something forward to at least try to offer some dignity, some help with the homeless and the unsheltered people. And basically, I'll explain this bill real quickly to you in a nutshell what this bill does, and I'll love to Representative Gaines to talk about his sub to put on the bill. Basically, the first section in this bill simply says this: that it forbids local governments from condoning unsanctioned street camping or activity or refusing to enforce their own laws against street camping or sleeping. It allows the Attorney General or private citizen to take action against a local government and secure an injunction against this violation. Very simple. The second section of this one authorizes the state auditor to conduct a performance audit of the state and local homeless spending. This audit will the state currently conducts performance audits on many aspects of state and local government, and they have led to obviously improved performance. And what we're saying is there's lots of 501(c) programs out there that deal with homeless. We don't know how much money is coming to the state. I've been told it's hundreds of millions. I've been told it's millions. I don't know what the number is. But the reality of it is we'd like to know where this money is going and how it's being spent and what's going on with the money, and is it getting to the homeless or the unsheltered people that's out there. And that would be the great start on getting this done. And then the crux of the whole bill, or the meat of the whole bill, is simply this. We all talk about homeless. We all talk about there's a problem. This is a bill that gets something started that hopefully we can change it as time moves on into something that can really be made into something for the homeless that truly will give them, a place to go and not have people literally sleeping on the expressways, under the bridges, all the above. Because we know that the mental health bill passed last year that came across under Speaker Ralston is going to be a good thing once it gets laid out. That'll help some of these people here, because there's no question in our mind that some of the homeless people or unsheltered people have some mental issues that we have to deal with. And Mr. Chairman, that's basically the meat of the bill.
All right. Well, thank you for presenting that and explaining the sub. And we had a pretty robust discussion about it this morning.
Yes, sir.
And took some public comment too. So
Yes,
are there any questions from the committee at this time? All right, got a couple of questions. I'll start with Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get organized, having just seen this. So, under our Georgia code, mandamus may issue if there is no other specific legal remedy. And you've got specific legal remedies provided for in this case. So this is in conflict with our code.
I wouldn't agree or disagree with being in conflict. I dealt with both sides of the aisle with their lawyers and the Senate lawyers, and we had a Q-Town action in the bill, and they removed the Q-Town action and called it a mandamus action, and both sides agreed that's where it needed to stay. That's what I know, Representative.
Okay, well, I've filed writ of mandamus cases in the work that I do as a lawyer, and the code says the writ of mandamus may issue to compel a due performance if there is no other specific legal remedy for the legal rights. So I don't think this is going to work, is I guess what I'm suggesting, that perhaps
I was okay
want
with
to
leaving the
about it.
Q-Town action in there, but when I
don't-
got bipartisan support, that's why we changed it over to the mandamus.
I understand, but there's another bill where I'm going to say the same thing, where on its face, if I see an issue that it's not legal on its face, I'm going to raise it every time. Because I hate that we end up in litigation that the taxpayers pay for because we keep passing bills that are illegal on their face. And so I'm going to raise it every time, whether this body agrees with me or not.
I would yield to your knowledge of legal more so than I have. Thank you.
Chairman Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we're moving forward and the author is amenable, I do have some language that's department approved from audits that would help ascertain some of this information from local governments for this particular study and that they're trying to do here. But I'd offer that up as an amendment at the appropriate time if it's so allowed.
Okay. All right. I'll come back to you at the appropriate time for that. Thank you.
Representative Blackman shared that with me, and I think it's excellent language, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Representative Alalier.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for presenting your bill. Quick question around resources coming from the state to fund initiatives addressed at our homelessness. Do you have any idea or any data?
Well, all I can tell you is this is the first time we've got the Senate put some extra money in the budget on our side for homeless. We put extra money in there. I mean, obviously we need a lot more. The reality of it, the representative, is what's coming in from the federal level that we don't know about. That's what we got to find out.
Yep.
And where the money is going. And I'll give you a prime example. I'm from South Georgia, and we think of Atlanta and we think of homeless, obviously, because Atlanta has obviously the most homeless. But we have homeless in every county I represent. And I have a massive district, and they're not getting any funding, literally. And they want to know, they want to do more. They want to help more. And, that's one of the main things why this audit is so important, and the language that Representative Blackman has. And then, of course, we can find out what your question is. We find the answer to your question.
Yeah, well, what I'm getting at is, and it seems as if you agree, it requires resources and staffing to address homelessness, correct?
Obviously, it requires resources, yes.
And so I don't think we should suggest that cities don't want to address the issues.
I would never say that. No.
This bill would effectively micromanage municipalities and the work that they're currently doing to address the issue, suggesting that they're not doing a good job, so the state has to come in and hold their hand and put their feet to the fire to do a better job. And from my seat, if we're not providing them with the resources and support that they need to do an already difficult job, in addition to public safety, in addition to education, in addition to roads and public works, they're having to make some difficult choices. I imagine those same tough choices are being made down in South Georgia where you live, sir. And so for me, it's hard to introduce a bill which is trying to micromanage really difficult work at the state level that municipalities are trying to do all that they can to address.
Well, with respect, sir, I would not write a bill that required a physical note. That was the intention of the bill, not to require a physical note.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Vice Chairman Gaines.
At the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to pass.
All right. We have a motion.
Second.
Do we have a second? We've got a second. Discussion. Representative Oliver.
For the benefit of my colleagues who weren't here at 8 o'clock this morning, Representative Gaines had an addition to the bill that hadn't been seen in the public before, and that's took up a lot of our good time spent this morning. And I'm looking at the substitute, And it looks like the provision that you added this morning is section 3, 1 and 3.
1, 3.
This provisions that Chairman Gaines has offered don't seem workable about prohibiting the dropping off. Dropping off is the word of the statute. A homeless person at some hospital facility outside the jurisdiction. I used the example this morning of I have 3 cities and a county and many different hospitals in different cities and different counties. And I was very confused this morning about how this was workable in any way, that there would be, quote, communication to agree to take a homeless person as an exception from prohibiting from taking him someplace. I just didn't see it as workable. And because it had not seen the vetting process of Sunshine, I don't know what the Hospital Association thinks about this, or the GMA thinks about this, or my 14 different law enforcement.
Let's let Vice Chairman Gaines explain.
No, thank you, Representative Oliver, for your comments this morning. We have run this by the Hospital Association, GMA, ACCG, and everybody's comfortable with the language. We did make the changes, getting rid of the 2 words "in advance" in both those sections to hopefully address your concerns. But all the parties that you've just mentioned are comfortable with this language that we have here.
Thank you. Chairman Blackman, do you want to share your amendment?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know our state auditor, Greg Griffin, is here if he would wish to speak to this. But in section 50-6-10 on page 5, I believe this would come after homelessness on line 96. We would add, all local governments and instrumentalities of the state shall cooperate with the state auditor and grant access at no cost to all financial records and other programmatic information necessary to the completion of the performance audit. Since we're requiring this performance audit, this would, help them, I think, access the information that we're requesting by passing this legislation.
All right. For clarity, would you read the amendment one more time?
I would. And if you'd like me to, I'll read the whole section, but it would just add in at the end of homelessness on line 96 that all local governments and instrumentalities of the state shall cooperate with the state auditor and grant access at no cost to all financial records and other programmatic information necessary to the completion of the performance audit.
All right. So, Representative Bernal, her light's been blinking for a little bit. Let's get to her, and then we'll look for a second to that motion.
Thank you, Chairman.
Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought this morning it was stated that the state cannot audit money that comes from the federal government. That was a part of the discussion this morning in subcommittee. And so I just wanted some clarification on that, just to make sure.
If our state auditor's here and would like to speak to that, I'd let him come up and speak.
All right, thank you.
So come on up to the podium. That's good. Tell us who you are and
Sure.
and
I'm
proceed.
Greg Griffin. I'm the state auditor. So I can try to answer the question of auditing federal money. We do have the ability to audit federal money that comes through the state. So that is, we do that as part of our federal single audit every year as part of the state. What this amendment is asking for is typically money that comes from the federal government directly to the local governments. We have limited ability and purview to audit those funds. So this amendment would give us, authorization to seek cooperation from those local governments with respect to this particular performance audit. One time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for explaining that, Mr. Griffin. So we have a motion for this amendment, the Blackman amendment. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second for the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. No. All right. Looks like it carries. And so back to discussion. I don't see any more. We've got a motion and a second as amended. All in favor of the amended sub to House Senate Bill 62, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. All right, we'll take a show of hands for a visual vote. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, opposed, raise your hand. All right, it carries. All right, thank you,
Mr.
Senator.
Chairman, I'm going to ask Representative Dempsey if she'll carry the bill, please, if it's good.
All right, Chairman Dempsey will carry the bill in the House.
Chairman Dempsey, yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, next, we're going to go to, let's see, is Senator Burns here to present Senate Bill 213? Yep. All right, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you Senate Bill 213. Just for verification, this is LC 472311S, SCS, so it's a committee substitute. So, this is a bill, this is a personal property rights bill. This is a home improvement bill. This is an affordable housing bill. And this is for the manufactured home industry. You will notice the definitions of manufactured home, mobile home, and new home. But the most important thing I would ask that you look carefully at is in lines 19 through 27. Notwithstanding other provisions of this chapter, when there is a replacement of a pre-existing manufactured home or mobile home with a new home within a manufactured home community or mobile home park or any other residential land, a local government shall not adopt or enforce any zoning decision or zoning ordinance or any other regulation or restriction to impose any condition on the new home that the property upon which the home sits, the owner's property that were not required, and at the end of the day, prevent the property owner from lawfully non-conforming use. So what has happened is I own a piece of property. I have a manufactured home on the property. I'm allowed to change the roof, replace the roof, repair the siding, to fix the plumbing or the air conditioning, but I'm not allowed to replace the home. If you'll notice on lines 28 and following, the section applies if you wish to continue in non-conforming use, line 30 and 31, they have to establish a new home within 12 months unless the discontinuance is a circumstance beyond the control of the property owner. So, if I own an existing home, I wish to replace it with a new manufactured unit, I'm allowed to continue to do that. We have situations in my district where people are landlocked, they lack the financial resources to build a site-built home, and their alternative is to improve their housing and their quality of housing by replacing an existing older unit with a new unit within 12 months. I'm happy to take questions. Again, this is a bill that will allow property owners to improve their property.
All right. And did you say, Mr. Chairman, that ACCG?
We've discussed this with ACCG and GMA. They're neutral on this.
Okay.
And I've talked to a number of county commissioners and county commission members and representatives and county chairs, and they recognize that in some cases the alternative is allow the continued use to degrade or allow the property owner to improve their own property. This bill would allow a property owner to have a quality home, but they must replace it with a new unit within 12 months.
All right. We got a question from Representative Gullett.
Thank you. So I'm just now reading through this bill. So make sure I got it right. So I have a manufactured home.
Yep.
Today, I want to replace it with a new manufactured home. Basically, you're saying that the local governments can't add new regulations or zonings or building not ordinances, but building
Codes.
in
Yeah,
order to
wait a
block me from replacing it with a new manufactured home.
That's correct. So,
Okay.
what has happened is I come in and I have a piece of property. At some point in the past, I put a conforming mobile home or manufactured home on it. Over time, the ordinance has changed, and now I am non-conforming.
Okay.
So I'm non-conforming to the current code, but the reality is, in most cases, I don't have an option. I can't buy more land. I'm landlocked, or I lack resources, and the only way I can improve my home is to replace it with a new unit. So the cost right now, it's just a nominal cost of $150 to $200 a square foot. A 1,200 square foot home would cost you in the neighborhood of $200,000 to $250,000 or more. And many individuals in my district don't have the financial resources or the credit worthiness to allow them to build a site-built home, but they can replace an existing unit with a new home and improve their quality of life. So that's what this bill does. And interestingly enough, I had at least one community. Their biggest concern is they allowed replacements within 6 months, and this bill would allow replacements within 12 months. And so they felt that we were being a little more lenient than they were willing to be. But I would suggest to you that if you have an existing unit and you want to improve the quality of your home, you should be allowed to do that.
All right. We got a question from Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I kind of understand this, but if you buy something that's new, does it have to be the same measurements? I mean, same materials?
There are no restrictions other than the setbacks and the fact that you cannot intrude on any of your neighbor's property rights. So as long as it is a new unit, now, and you realize that in 2023, the quality of a manufactured home is significantly greater than it was 50 years ago or 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. And I suspect that many of you are aware there's a major initiative along the lines of what are referred to as tiny homes. And tiny homes are indeed manufactured homes that serve a particular need and provide a particular standard of quality in living. So this bill would just allow the property owner to make an independent decision to improve their home by replacing it with a new unit. Must be new.
Okay, just one more question. So, so the city or county couldn't tell them, couldn't give any more zoning? Is that what you're asking?
They can't enforce the zoning changes they've made. So if I was a conforming use, let's say in one county I represent, single wide mobile homes are allowed on 5 acres. Double wides are allowed on 2.5 acres. That's the current code. At some time in the past, the restrictions for acreage was not in place. So I may have owned an acre or even a half acre, and I had a mobile home on it. Now there's no way I can improve the quality of my housing. I am forced to sell my property and find an alternative place to live. And the reality is, in most areas, there's no property available at a reasonable price. So what we're hoping to be able to do with this bill is to allow that property owner, that homeowner, to improve the quality of where they live.
Okay.
And it's an affordable housing option. It's a property rights option.
All right, I understand that. So when you have those mobile home parks, this would apply to them also?
It would, however, they would have to replace a unit. If they replaced any unit, they would have to replace it with a new unit. And I would suggest to you that in many cases, the mobile home park concept itself is moving into a more multi-family housing environment as opposed to a mobile home community.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. We're going to move to Chairman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. On line 21, it refers to to it as other residential land.
Right.
What if you're out in the country and you're zoned ag?
Right.
Would it apply to them?
Well, again, if you're an ag land, normally in the environment that I'm familiar with, normally it's a 5-acre minimal lot size for a home. I would suggest to you that as long as they conform to 5 acres, it's not an issue. If that home pre-existed, so if it was there prior to that restriction being placed, and instead of having 5 acres, I'm in an ag environment and I'm on a 1-acre lot or even smaller, depending upon my water and sewer capacity. Normally it's a well with a septic in that environment. I could still replace my home even though I didn't have the 5 acres. So again, we recognize that our counties would like to be able to zone their communities appropriately, and we support that. But if a property owner was already there and it already had a pre-existing home in place before the ordinances were adopted, they would have a status of non-conforming use. And what we're asking is that they have continued non-conforming use so they can improve the quality of their environment.
Chairman Taylor, do you mind using a mic next to you? Which one's easier to reach? I'm not sure yours is working.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to follow up quickly, what if the area has become zoned commercial? That was mine because we've had a lot of commercial.
Right, well, the advantage of that, and we've also had some issues similar to a situation where maybe you're on a lakefront or a riverfront. The interesting thing is that the economics of your community will determine the value of your property. And so if you were in a situation where you had a small tract in a non-conforming use basis, I would like for you to have the option of replacing and improving that unit, but in reality, you might prefer to market your property and then relocate to a more appropriate location for your home. Because if it's commercial, if it's zone commercial, the likelihood of you wanting to remain in that particular zone set is pretty slim.
Thank you.
And I will tell you, the market will deal with issues of commercial property or high-end property on a lake or a river or some other amenity that would establish value.
Thank you.
Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, you talking about, in my mind, two separate situations here. One of them is single-family homes.
Correct.
That's the person who lives in the manufactured homes and they want to get a new one and put it on their lot.
Correct.
I put that in one corner of my mind. The other situation is a mobile home lot.
Correct.
Or a trailer park, as it's sometimes referred to.
A leased lot, not a deeded lot. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, you know, the trailer park can take many different forms.
Okay, I would agree. You're correct.
Right. I know in the city of Harlem, they have a situation where there was a trailer park that was grandfathered in before they had zoning. It has no paved roads.
Right.
It doesn't have sufficient water pressure or lines. It has septic tanks, to the best of my ability, rather than sewer. It doesn't have any street lights. And they would like to bring that up to code. They cannot because it is it's grandfathered in. But what you cannot do is build a new house, or in this case, put a new trailer into a new unit on it. Yeah.
Right.
When the old unit is gone, it's gone. Now you can do that if you bring it up to what I call code with all the amenities I just mentioned. If you build a trailer park in Harlem now, which you can, you have to put the paved roads, you have to have the street lights, you have to have sidewalks, all the things they require of any other residential area. So my concern is that for that trailer lot in Harlem, where they're now about to get it where it's either going to be brought up to code or not, this is going to change all that.
It could certainly impact that. I would certainly defer to the wisdom of the committee if you wanted to address that issue independently, either in this bill or another bill. The intent is to protect property rights and provide alternatives for affordable housing. I agree with the representative on his concerns, and I have certainly seen those concerns. At the end of the day, should local governments be in the position of forcing people to sell out or force them to in some way meet standards that have been imposed since they initially established ownership and established use?
I would say no to that single-family lot. I'm agreeing with you on that. That's why I'm putting it in one
Right.
over here.
Right.
I'm putting it into a different spot, the
Right.
trailer park,
Okay.
because there was a day when, you know, you didn't have paved roads, you didn't have sewer, you didn't have water, you didn't have street lights, you didn't have sidewalks. That was very common. That day is changing in many places, and that's probably a good change.
I agree.
So if we amended the bill to make this effective against single-family lots, but not against mobile homes and trailer parks, would you be opposed to that?
I would not oppose that. I would accept that as the will of the committee. I would prefer it run clean, and I would tell you that I think the industry would prefer that it would run clean, the manufactured home industry, because what we're trying to do is improve the overall quality of housing in our state, and this is one way to do that. And we also want to provide affordable housing. I would suggest that if you considered such a thing, then now you're into a situation of minimal size lots or minimal amenities in a subdivision, let's say. And none of those requirements were there when that subdivision or that housing environment was established. So we're forcing landowners to retroactively comply because they're trying to improve the quality of their environment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any more questions. I would entertain a motion. All right, we have a motion from Representative Saines, and we have a second from Representative Anderson, and we are in a posture of discussion. And so back to Representative Fleming.
Mr. Chairman, on line 20, I would propose an amendment. After the second word home, on line 20, adding the words only on a single family lot. And I would also strike, after that second use of the word homes, the words within a manufactured home community or mobile home park or on other residential land. So the result would be, it would read, notwithstanding any other provision of this chapter, when there is a replacement of a pre-existing mobile home or mobile home only on a single family lot, comma, a local government shall not adopt or enforce a zoning decision. And I believe the result of that is exactly what I asked the senator, that this would protect that person who has a single family home lot and wants to replace it with a new mobile home, but it would not affect the trailer parks.
Does
Would
You wanna respond?
Representative Fleming restate that just for clarification?
Sure.
So on line 20,
Mr. Chairman, if I would restate it, on line 20, after the third use of the word home, actually,
thank
my
you.
bad, I
There you go.
apologize.
There you go.
The third use of the word home, so it would read this way: a pre-existing manufactured home or mobile home with a new home, comma, and here are the new words, only on a single family lot, comma, and then you would strike on that line the words within a manufactured home community or a mobile home park or any other residential land. In other words, you're replacing that phrase with only on a single family lot. And I'm going to look at Legislative Counsel to see if he understands what my amendment is. He's giving me the thumbs up.
Good.
all right, so I'm looking over at Mr. Morelli now. We good with that amendment? All right, got it. So we've got a motion for the amendment, the Fleming amendment. Here's a second. Is okay, Representative Roberts.
Thank you. So I'm trying to figure out what the objective is with this, because why would we want to deny somebody in a mobile home park from having the same ability to put a new home in and be able to stay in their home. If someone owns 5 manufactured homes and they lease them out to the tenants, then this language is going to ban the replacement of those homes, and the owner is going to be forced either to keep the deteriorating homes, or that owner would not be allowed to replace the home.
Yes, please.
So you can't keep a deteriorating home because once it gets inhabitable, you can no longer allow anybody to live there. So what we're doing is avoiding, if we don't do this, we're not allowing the city to force, in this case, the mobile home park, which has been grandfathered in, to be brought up to what I would say code. And when I do say that, I mean water, sewer, roads, lights, sidewalks. In other words, today in my hometown, if you're going to build a trailer park, which you can, you have to put water, sewer, roads, lights, sidewalks. These old trailer parks that existed starting 40 years ago before we had zoning, you didn't have any of that. And what the city says is that you can put a new mobile home in there if you want to, but you got to bring it up to code. So what we're doing is we're not affecting, by this amendment, the single family homeowner on a lot, but we are going to not affect the current situation with trailer parks.
Okay.
All right. So, any more comment on the amendment?
I defer to the will of the committee. I do feel that we should allow a property owner to improve the quality of their home by requiring them to replace it with a new unit. And I certainly agree with Representative Fleming's position as far as the amenities or the infrastructure that would be appropriate in a high density area. But I have to point out that this has been a practice that has not been changed because of the ownership. It's been changed because of the county or the city adding additional ordinances. So it's basically a non-conforming use request.
All right. We've got a comment from Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This would actually be a question to direct towards Representative Fleming regarding his proposed amendment here. There are trailer parks, communities, mobile home parks out there where people own the home and just lease the dirt, okay, the place to put it and the hookups and that sort of thing. How would your amendment affect that scenario, if I may, sir?
So the zoning applies to the land. Whatever the zoning applies to the land affects everything you put above it. So
Okay.
so in that situation, whoever owned the land, the leaseor of the land tells the leasee, the person with the trailer, what they can and cannot do there. And so if the landowner cannot put a new trailer there, then the leasee cannot put a new trailer there. So if you're in a trailer park and you have a very old trailer and it's gotten to the point where it's no longer habitable, you can't put another trailer there. Now, if you're a single family lot and it's your property and you own it, you certainly can, because we're making that exception here. But if it's a trailer park that doesn't, in my situation, in my hometown, that doesn't have, and I'm thinking of 2 specifically, and it's we have a lot of issues there with them. They don't have their own well water, as I understand it, their own septic tank, as I understand it. There's no sidewalks, there is no street lights, there's no paved roads in there. All the things which are required if you build a new trailer park today. None of that stuff is there, and the city's trying to get them to come up to code. They're not doing anything by making them not be there. But if you're going to bring in new trailers, you have to meet those requirements.
Okay. I'm just trying to reason in my mind with the intent of the bill here to allow the owner of the manufactured home to upgrade their home itself. How the amendment would potentially have a negative impact on those people that own the home but lease the land.
Here's the change we're making. The senator presented a scenario. Person lives on property. Mm-hmm. They have a trailer. They can't replace it because it's been zoned and it's not allowed there. This bill allows them to replace that trailer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
However, it's not. That's for a single family lot. A mobile home is not going to be considered a single family lot, very likely. Now, if that situation you just said is zoned single family, they could absolutely replace it. But if it's zoned mobile home lot, they would have to make sure everything else that the city requires is there.
Okay.
There's going to be there are some cities that don't have any requirements for trailer parks. I mean, you don't have to put any of those amenities in. Usually, it's in places like mine that are developing fast, and the land's becoming much more valuable. And someone mentioned earlier, in one of these, we had that situation that was mentioned earlier with a commercial situation. We had a trailer park in the middle of what is now a commercial district, and a lot of issues there, a lot of problems there. And finally, it got dealt with, but it was a problem.
Thank you.
Representative Alalier.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a similar concern to Representative Anderson's. From my understanding of this bill, the intent is to limit barriers to replacing deteriorating manufactured homes. And this amendment, while it would allow property owner on a single family lot to do so, if I'm renting land and the owner of said land is wanting to replace their manufactured home, it now becomes more prohibitive to do so with this amendment. And so if the intent is to lower barriers to replacement, this amendment makes that much harder with the language proposed by Representative Fleming. So I want to make sure that we're not jeopardizing the intent by including this amendment. And I appreciate Representative Anderson bringing that up. I was chewing on the same thought on my end.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the only thing you said was wrong in your statement of understanding what is here. If you own that lot, it's a single-family lot, you're not prohibited from doing what you just asked. It's really only if it's in a trailer park.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification. The average replacement cost of a new manufactured home today is well over $100,000. So it's a substantial investment by the property owner, whether the property owner is a single family property owner or perhaps someone who has more than one lot that they might offer for lease or sublet. So the significant investment of the owner of the property will provide additional resources to the community to improve the amenities.
So it's well into six figures to replace one of these, but still much less than a site-built home.
Correct. So I would suggest it's probably 50 to 70% of a site-built home, but the reality is you're still looking at a significant investment if you choose to improve your own home.
All right. Representative Roberts, do you still have a question?
I was just going to say, if the intent is to allow these people to stay where they've lived, then I understand what Representative Fleming is saying, but I've also seen cities and counties impose new zoning districts on properties for the express purpose of forcing them out. If the house burns down more than 70%, they can't even replace it. And so I'm sitting here looking at elderly people in my community who cannot afford to move out of their bigger house because they can't buy anything else in the community they've lived in forever. And so here we are with an opportunity, replacing sewer and water and all of those things in rural areas. I know I used to have a house up at Lake Lanier. There were lots of mobile homes up there, mobile home parks. Like, that's expensive. So what's going to push that landowner to do those things? I just feel like you're also going to force out tenants, and I don't like that we're distinguishing between mobile homes that are on a single-family lot versus mobile homes that are leased by, that are on leased land. So I'm in support of the bill as it was before.
All right, thank you. So this bill, we ran out of time to hear this in subcommittee.
We did. We were not
And-
able to hear it in subcommittee.
Right, and so we weren't able to take, comment from the public. The Georgia Association of Manufactured Homes is here, and I'm going to give them a chance to speak to the bill. Try to keep it fairly brief if you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Tell us who you are, introduce yourself, and then proceed.
My name is Jimmy Cotty. I'm the Executive Director for the Georgia Manufactured Housing Association, and appreciate the opportunity to speak. I know we got bumped earlier this morning. I'll be brief. Chairman Burns is right. The intent of this bill is to give people an opportunity to upgrade their situation where they currently are, regardless of single family, regardless of being in a manufactured housing community. To speak to some of those concerns we've heard here, there are numerous owners out there, that have communities in which people own their own homes and just pay rent for the dirt. So they're a property owner and they own their homes. Second of all, numerous community owners would like to invest more in their communities, but they know they can't replace their homes. So they don't. They continue to put Band-Aids on existing homes and rehab as much as they can, because they know once that asset is gone, they're going to lose the ability to maintain it. So the lack of investment, I think sometimes that we see, there are people out there that want to do it. There are people out there that do a very good job with it. There are people out there that have gone to some communities that have not been very friendly to manufactured homes and have turned around some very nice communities there locally and have won the locals over. So I would suggest if community owners knew that they had the opportunity to replace existing homes that were aging out, they'd also see it as an opportunity to invest in the community itself and begin to make some of those upgrades that currently they may not have. That's all. Thank you, sir.
All right. Representative Bazemore, is your question for the speaker?
No.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask if we could also hear from the realtors and get some more insight on this.
Okay. Since if the realtors are here and since we weren't able to take public comment this morning, yes.
Happy to do it. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative. We support the bill 100% in the original.
Would you state
Yes,
your name,
sir.
please?
I try to go too fast.
Yeah.
Brad Mock with the Georgia Association of Realtors. Thank you for your time and thank you for the opportunity to speak to it. We support the bill 100%, support it in the Senate. There's a real opportunity here to fix at least part of a huge housing access problem. There just aren't enough houses out there. There are affordable options. When we restrict existing affordable options, we're going to choke off the supply. Georgia will not be the #1 state to do business if we don't approach the problem. This is a huge step forward that I'm thankful for. When somebody's house burns down, whether they're a tenant or not, they should be allowed to replace it. And if an owner wants to replace that in a trailer park like the one I grew up in, then they should have that opportunity. If our house fell apart and mom and dad couldn't replace it, then where would I have lived? And I think there's a real problem with deciding that leasing a home is somehow different from owning it. And if someone wants the opportunity to replace it, it doesn't bring any new manufactured homes to a county or city. So if a county or city wants to stand firm and say, we don't want any new manufactured homes, then they'll be allowed to do that, no problem. But this gives them a chance to replace one that is there, that is older, that is deteriorating, and maybe it's deteriorating because the opportunity to replace it was never there in the first place. But now it will be. And if they want to upgrade, they'll have that opportunity too. You're going to give people a chance to age in place. You're going to give people a chance to raise their kids in place. I would encourage you to vote yes on the original bill. Of course, we love the concept and are thankful for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. All right. I'm going to go back to, all right. If you want to come back up, Mr. Mock, I think Representative Fleming has a question.
You just made the statement that if a city or county doesn't want mobile homes, they can just say no more mobile homes. And you just said that, correct?
The existing bans or new bans on manufactured housings, I believe, would stay, sir. I think what this does is that if you had a home before, to the senator's point earlier, and now that home is a non-conforming use, that, and you're familiar with that language, you can replace that home. But when bans are in place, it means no new manufactured homes would come in. So if they want to stand firm on, we have a ban in place of some kind, then a new one an additional one would not be brought in. You
So
couldn't
what
just
you're,
drop
what you're
one
telling
in.
the committee under Georgia law is that cities and counties can ban mobile homes.
At this time, I believe that's correct.
I didn't know that. I thought they couldn't.
Can do it through not through conforming use, right? Yes, sir. I believe that's the case.
Well,
And I believe this takes a big step forward in a way, but doesn't undo
I
that.
could be wrong, but I think you and I do agree upon what the Georgia law is in this area.
Oh, yes, sir. You are a smarter man than me.
I
and
just
we
didn't
have
want the
disagreed
committee to
before.
think any city or county could ban mobile homes because I don't believe they can.
So generally, there are a lot of different approaches to it, and I don't think we would have to bring this bill forward if the case wasn't that a city or county can ban manufactured homes.
So what's at play here is not the ban, it is the requirement of the zoning and, as I mentioned, the amenities. You can build a trailer park in a city or county now where it's properly zoned, but you have to put in amenities. It has to not be a place that doesn't have sidewalks, lighting, sewer, water, these kind of things.
Sure.
If the city or county requires that, some do not. In fact, most do not.
Sure.
But a few do.
So I guess when I see a city or county come in and say, well, you can have a manufactured home, but you have to have 15 acres, not trying to put words in your mouth, but that's not a ban. It's a restriction, right? So extreme restrictions might exist like that, and this will allow a person to be able to replace a home and would not impact those restrictions at all.
So the
Those
example
restrictions could stay in place.
you just given, the amendment I made would allow for that.
It would
If
allow
it's
for
a
that,
single
but-
family home, it can be replaced.
In that one, yes, sir, but it would not allow for it when someone owns a home and they have tenants and it's in a location that is referred to as a park in your amendment. So those folks would not be allowed to replace.
They would be, but the property without sidewalks, water, sewer, lights, whatever it is, would have to be brought to code first.
You know, you said it first. I think we disagree,
Thank you, Mr.
and I
Chairman.
appreciate the conversation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mock.
Thank you.
So we had the amendment, motion for the amendment. Do we have a second for them? And we have a second for the amendment. And so we'll go ahead and vote on the amendment. So all in favor of the Fleming amendment, say aye. Opposed? No. All right, we'll do a hand vote on the amendment. All right, so all in favor? Okay. All right. Fleming concedes. So the amendment fails, and so we'll move on to vote on the bill, the original bill. So we have a motion and a second on the original bill. So all in favor of the bill, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. All right, the bill passes. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Representative Washburn. I believe Representative Washburn will carry this bill in the Senate.
All right, well, thank you. That was my next question to you. Thank you. All right, I believe Senator Matt Hatchett, Bo Hatchett, is going to present the next bill for his colleague in the Senate, Senate Bill 26.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's very common I'm called Matt down here. That's right.
Yeah.
And
Senator Hatchett, excuse me, if you would read the LC numbers, we can make sure we've got the correct version in front of us.
I will, and I also would ask if I could have Josh Stevens from the Georgia Economic Development Authority to testify with me to help answer some questions about the mechanics of the bill.
Of course. Come on up, Mr. Stevens.
So I'm reading off of LC 393897S. I know there was an amendment made this morning, and I haven't had a chance to get that. It was a very minor amendment that was made to the section. Is that the correct LC?
I don't believe that's the version we have in front of us.
All right, I haven't. We've been busy passing House bills, so I haven't been able to make it into my office to get
All
this.
right. I hope that's true.
We're doing the best we can. No, the underlying bill.
Just so I think.
I'll read the LC number.
All right. I think Molly just delivered you the one we've got in front of us.
Okay, good
Yeah.
deal. LC 472464S. The original bill that was Senator Dolezal's is in Part 2. Section 2.1, which is basically in response to the COVID pandemic and allowing certain boards to meet remotely via Zoom. This just expands it to workforce development boards, and a lot of people wanted to be included in this, so we also got development authorities, community improvement districts, hospital authorities, and the board of trustees or other governing body of any large retirement system. They still have to comply with all the notice requirements, but I think that part of the bill has been properly vetted and haven't had any questions. The second part of the bill, which Senator Dolezal was kind enough to work with the governor's office, is the one I'd like to address the policy on. As many of you have heard, Governor Kemp has laid out a vision for Georgia to become the electric mobility capital of America, which we are well on our way to accomplishing, thanks to the support and efforts of this body as well as the partners across state government and the private sector. In July of 2021, Governor Kemp announced the formation of the Georgia Electric Mobility Innovation Alliance, or EMEA, which was a public-private partnership led by the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and constituted a statewide initiative between government, industries, electric utilities, nonprofits, and other relevant stakeholders. The partnership was focused on growing electric mobility ecosystem in the state and strengthening Georgia's position in electrification-related manufacturing and innovation. EMEA's mission was to support the growth of the entire electric mobility industry and foster innovation in the state by creating a business-friendly environment for the industry and promoting favorable public policy. Upon the conclusion of the Alliance initial meetings, a list of recommendations and forward-looking guidance was published into a report with the intent to convey helpful information and outcomes to policymakers and leaders as well as others involved in the e-mobility industry. Among the recommended outcomes of the EMEA report was the continuance of a partnership that would enable the state to continue to study and coordinate the efforts and forward-looking solutions with the legislative and executive branches as well as the private sector. And that's what this bill hopes to accomplish. It accomplishes the following. Number one, it allows the Georgia Department of Economic Development to create a statewide electric vehicle manufacturing program for the promotion of EVs and components in Georgia. It also is going to advance the EV industry in Georgia by marketing, recruiting, and promoting it. I want to be clear, this program may not address the sale, distribution, or servicing of electric vehicles. Second, this bill creates a Georgia Electric Vehicle Manufacturing Commission. So it continues to work and progress made by the Electric Mobility Innovation Alliance in 21 and 22. This commission will be comprised of a variety of both public and private sector stakeholders and will formulate recommendations to the governor and the General Assembly to establish, implement, and support a statewide EV manufacturing program, which will advise the department on a variety of critical subjects. So basically, this is going to be an advisory commission to make recommendations to the governor and to the General Assembly. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to yield for any questions.
All right. You're a governor's floor leader, right?
That's correct.
And so can we call this a governor's bill?
This is a governor's bill.
All
yes,
right.
It is.
Okay. So I heard from our lead counsel a couple minutes ago, and I'm going to let him speak to just a small change that he caught that he thinks we need. So, Mr. Morelli.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I just noticed that when I put this sub together after the subcommittee meeting this morning, I forgot to update the title to address the change that we're also allowing certain retirement boards to meet via Open Records Act. So if somebody could make a motion to amend to give me the permission to update the title, we'll get that fixed before the bill goes to the full House.
I think Representative Anderson will make the motion.
I'll so move.
And we have. That's true. So when we get to that time, we'll handle that. So thank you for bringing that up. All right. Do we have any questions of the sponsor? All right. I don't see any questions. Do we have a motion? All right, we have a motion, we have a second. And Mr. Stevens, did you have anything to add to the presentation?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All right, now Representative Anderson.
Move that we allow Legislative Council to adjust the title to reflect the changes made.
We have a motion and a second to allow council to make changes to the title. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, so that carries. All right, I don't see any further discussion, so all in favor of the bill, the amended bill? Any opposed? Say no. All right, it carries. Thank
you
you.
very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
All right. My friend Senator Rick Williams, are you here to present Senate Bill 129?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Yes, and if you could start by reading the LC number that you have.
LC 472066.
All right. Molly's going to bring you a new sub
Okay.
that the committee has in front of us.
LC 472471S.
Okay.
What the original bill did, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, was allowing people to get time off to go vote. The code now allowed people to get up to 2 hours off to go vote on election day. This bill would allow them to do that during early voting, the 21 days of early voting. And it would be a mutual consent between the employer and the employee. So that's basically what the original bill was. I think also in the bill was absentee ballot applications that were being sent out. A lot of people were confused. They were getting many of those, and they were not aware of who it was coming from. And during past elections, some people filled out 5, 6, even 7 absentee ballot applications, and those things kept going in and it bogged the system. And so what it requires is on this application, and a lot of people would even tell me, I received absentee ballots. They didn't, and they couldn't without them applying. What they actually received was an absentee ballot application. And what this bill requires that this application is being distributed by, and it has to state who is sending it out, and the name and address of person or organization or other entity distributing such document or material, and not by any government agency or any state or local election office, and it would state this is not a ballot. So that would be on the front to make it very plain that it is not a ballot. On line 87, it struck be contained and just did away with be and just replaced it with contained. On line 89, it struck be printed and just have the word printed. On line 98 is where it talks on the either on one of the days that are designated for advance in-person voting, and it strikes the wording in Senate's 101, 102, 103, changes the time on line 110 to 11:59 p.m. This is requested by the Secretary of State's office, a little cleanup to help the local elections office not have so much deadline that they have to stop and do a report, as they can continue working, and it gives them 2 more hours to do that report. On line 142, 141, local election superintendents shall conduct pre-certification tabulation or risk limiting audits on one contest following any election, special election, election runoff, special election runoff, primary, special primary, primary runoff, or special primary runoff with federal, statewide contest. So it just changed some of the wording there, and it struck lines 161 through 169, and I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And if y'all will vote on this, I'll be glad to go. Get on
All
your
right.
way.
Well, thank you, Senator Williams. I would call this a voter-friendly bill.
Yes, sir.
The bill would allow for extra time off.
Yes, sir.
Even though, with 3 weeks of early voting and Saturday voting, it's very likely that a employee has time off work during those hours anyway. This bill still gives, up to 2 hours off.
That's right.
Of scheduled time in coordination with their employer. So thanks for bringing the bill, and there's some Secretary of State cleanup language in here too. And looks like the screen is lighting up with a few questions for you. So if you'll take some questions, I'll start with Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the bill. I just had one question. The part about, you were talking about people were receiving those applications. I thought that was pre-SB 202. I didn't think that they were still sending out applications for absentee ballot.
Some people still, I think this just clarifies language, and this is from SOS. I know that I myself, even before 202, received some, and I don't recall if I received any this past election cycle or not, but I think this might be just some cleanup language from the Secretary of State's office stating that they have to put on there, this is not a ballot, is the main thing, just to clarify so that people are not confused, that they think that I received a ballot. What did you do with it? Well, I just threw it in the trash. That's what I heard a lot. So I think this is just clarifying that so that people realize that they've received some type of advertising material and it is not a ballot.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Chairman Powell.
Thank you. I want to thank my friend, and he's turned in an awful good senator, but after all, he was trained over in the House. But I think it's an awful good bill. The only thing I know that would make this bill better if it had a little chain of custody language in there. If it comes back over, maybe I could entertain you to put that over into this bill. But I want to thank you as a former member of the House and as a member of the Special Committee on Election Reform. He proved to be a very good member of that. Very astute knowledge, having been a member of his Board of Elections for several years down in Baldwin County. I want to thank you for bringing this bill.
Thanks, sir.
I want to echo that thanks. I know you've done a lot of hard work with our elections over the years and in the General Assembly. Representative Olalier.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator,
yes,
this is a great bill. It's employee friendly. It pro-voter, pro-voting, and just appreciate all the hard work that you've poured into this. And Chair, when appropriate, I'd love to move due pass.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor of passage of this bill, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All right, the bill passes.
Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it, and I'm not sure who's going to be carried in the House yet, but I'll let you know soon.
Okay, I believe it's Representative Rob Leverett that's carrying this bill. Yep, and he's on this committee but was unable to be here. at this time, so he's agreed to carry the bill.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next, if Senator Burns is still with us, he'll come present Senate Bill 222.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, we had a robust discussion of Senate Bill 222 in subcommittee. I appreciate Chairman Anderson and his skill in negotiating us through those opportunities. Thank you very much. Senate Bill 222, I'm working off of LC 472324S SCS, which is a committee sub.
I think Molly's going to bring you the sub we have in front of us. Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I was aware that this might be a part of our discussion, so let me take a moment and verify that I'm comfortable with where we are. Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're now working off of LC 472465S. This is a House committee substitute. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
That is correct.
Okay. So, as we discuss it, I want to point out that the original SB 222 bill was designed to clarify the intent of SB 202. And the intent of SB 202 was to prohibit third-party engagement in funding elections in Georgia. So that if you look carefully at Section 1, there's just a few quick definitions of a government employee and a person. I want to call your attention to line 25. I believe it's the same line. No, it's line 30 in your substitute. On line 30 of your substitute, all costs and expenses related to conducting primaries, elections, runoffs, or other undertakings authorized or required by this statute should be paid for by lawfully appropriated funds, lawfully appropriated public funds. Make sure we see that. And then as you look down a bit in the next section, Section C, you will notice that no county or municipal government or government employee shall solicit, take, or otherwise accept from any person a contribution, donation, or service or anything of value for the purpose of conducting primaries or elections. And then if you look in Section D, it requires that if someone had received that on line 42, it requires that those funds be immediately returned within 14 days. We had a robust discussion of that. And then on line 44, on line 44, there's the discussion about what is acceptable as far as contribution. So the code section does not exclude the donation or use of a location for voting or services provided without remuneration or goods of nominal value less than $200. So you can still utilize local support and local resources. And finally, a robust discussion on the violation section 47 through 49. It's a severe penalty to break Georgia law. And I'll go back to the fundamentals of the tenets 2 years ago when I began to deal with the challenges of elections. And I appreciate my good friend from Harlem who's slipped away, but he and I worked very hard collectively along with others on SB 202. But at the end of the day, our fundamental tenets were every legal vote counts, period. Every legal vote counts. That's the first thing. Second thing is every county follows Georgia law, all 159. So every county follows Georgia law. And then finally, you have confidence that your vote counts, and I have confidence that my vote counts. Now, this section is the violation section, which would suggest that if you break this law, it's a felony, and you could serve imprisonment of not less than 1 year and have a major fine of $10,000, not less than 10. So we do realize that's a severe punishment and violation, but we think that the security and validity of our elections necessitate that we all follow Georgia law. Section 2, let me make sure. Mr. Chairman, the substitute did not include section 2, lines 45 through 52 of the original bill, nor did it include lines 53 through 63 of the original bill. And those sections are only need to be included because they specify that no superintendent, county, or municipality, I'm going back to my original bill, 472324S. Is that section 3? Show it to me. I need to see it. I can't quite go that fast. Section 3 in the original. So what you did is you put section 2 in. All right. Thank you for your help. You are correct. So jump over to section 3, and that's my old section 2. Section 4 is the old section 3. Is that correct? Thank you very much. Appreciate the help. First time I've seen the substitute. Okay. Now, if you look at section 2. Section 2 is new language, and I would ask the sponsor of the House substitute to speak to section 2 of LC 2465S. I know what it does, I know what it is, but it's just a substitute from the committee, not from the Senate.
So, Vice Chairman Gaines, you prepared to speak to the bill? All right.
So Section 2 would make the state election board a distinct budget item within the budget, and allow the board to appoint an executive director, and that's what Section 2 is relating to, is allowing the state election board to be a separate and distinct budget item within our budget process.
And I would point out that in section 2, lines 51 through 137 have very limited changes, just striking out the terminology of the Secretary of State. But then in lines 138 through the end of through the 181, the end of the section, is all the new language that would stand up an independent state election board. Is that correct? All right, thank you. I appreciate the substitute, Mr. Chairman. I would say that that's an issue for the committee to consider, and we'll be happy to work with you based upon what your decision is. Original bill is the bill that I have the most focus and concern about. I want to make sure that SB 222 in its original form moves judiciously through the process.
And is it your opinion that your original bill is included in this sub with
That
the
is
addition?
Correct. Right.
Yes.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate, I believe, Vice Chairman Gaines pointing out that section 3 and 4 are really in the bill. They're just renumbered. Right.
Yep. Okay. We've got some questions, and I'll first go to Chairman Taylor. Use mic 24 if you don't mind.
Thank you. Just one question, and it had to do with, let's see, lines 48, where it says about the violation.
Correct.
Is it the person that gives the donation, or is it the person that receives it?
It would be the person who receives the donation. So if you solicit and receive a contribution from a third party for the purpose of conducting elections, that would be a violation. I would say that there is a mechanism so that the state of Georgia can accept contributions and then distribute those contributions across the state as appropriate, but it would not be at the discretion of the person who makes the contribution. So currently what's happening is certain individuals selectively contribute to some communities and ignore others. We accept contributions to the state of Georgia, and then the state of Georgia could then provide that back out to the local election officials.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I have a few more questions. Representative Anulis.
Thank you. Just looking through this in lines 180 and 181, giving the State Elections Board the authority to appoint investigators. Didn't we give the GBI that authority with SB 89 last year?
SB 89, you're right. The GBI has original jurisdiction for election violations, but at the current time, the Secretary of State's investigation division handles most investigations associated with election fraud allegations. So this section, and I need to refer to Vice Chairman Gaines, this section would allow the state election board to have independent investigative power.
But they could also still use the GBI if they wanted to.
That is correct. That is correct.
It's a lot of investigators.
It certainly is. And I would just point out that the Secretary of State already has an investigation division, but realize the Secretary of State provides investigations for much more than elections. So because of their responsibility in licensure, nursing.
Right, I believe that was a lot of the motivation behind SB 89.
Well, SB
part of it
89,
at least.
I believe that, I can't speak to that, but I believe the motivation behind SB 89 was to provide the opportunity for the GBI to have original jurisdiction when there was concerns about election fraud.
But if this bill were to pass, then investigative powers would be held by the Secretary of State's office, the GBI, and now the State Elections Board. So 3 different entities would have investigative authority.
That is my understanding. Is that the Vice Chair's understanding? Okay.
Why is there the need for I'm sorry, if I could ask one more question. Just what is the motivation and the necessity for that kind of investigative redundancy? I know you mentioned the licensing board, the other things the Secretary of State does, but I guess I'm not seeing the need for that kind of investigative redundancy.
I appreciate your question. This is not my amendment, so I'm not advocating for this. I'm accepting this as a friendly substitute.
Representative Nulowitz, we may circle back to that. So, in the meantime, we're going to go to some others with questions, starting with Representative Bazemore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, once again.
Thank you.
Just question about this bill adding an executive director. Do we have a fiscal note for that, and how much is that going to be?
I appreciate the question, but again, I did not offer the substitute. I would have to defer to the authors of the substitute and ask them to address your concerns. The underlying bill, 222, does not include an executive director or investigative powers.
Can he answer? The author, please. Mr. Chair.
You ready to respond? All right, okay, because we could take more questions and circle back if you need time. Are you ready? All right. So, Vice Chairman Gaines.
And we can come back to as needed, but, it would be up to the board to make that recommendation on and have the power to appoint an executive director. There's not a fiscal note on this. Typically, I think the amount that fiscal notes requires, it's a couple $1 million typically. So this would not fall under that need, but this would be something that the General Assembly would determine in its budget every year on how much funding to appropriate to the State Board of Elections. So this would be an annual item that we would consider in our appropriations acts.
If you don't mind, follow-up question. So is this going to go into effect immediately and backdate, or because you said we'll make the decision next year and continue to make the decision?
The bill takes effect July of 23. Again, it would be up to the board. They would have to have the funding appropriated by the General Assembly in order to make that higher.
Right.
One thing, generally speaking, this item should not have any fiscal impact because these funds currently are just appropriated to the Secretary of State's office. This would just, you'd have a distinct budget item for the State Elections Board, so there shouldn't be much of a fiscal impact to the state. It would just be separating those budget items out.
Okay.
Okay, Representative Bazemore has a question for Senator Burns.
I'm sorry, and this might not be yours also,
All right,
but
look,
I see the investigators. It looks as though several investigators can be hired from the Secretary of State. Is that not true? And if it is, what's the cost?
Again, I appreciate the question, but that's not a part of the underlying bill.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to move along to, let's see, Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have, I guess one question. I served on the Special Election Committee, SB 202. And one of the things that kept coming up was the fact that there's never a fiscal note, but we don't want the counties to accept funds. We now want people to go to jail, and then Vice Chair Gaines, you said this is a budget item. So if we could put a budget item in for an investigator, I can't understand why we cannot put a budget item in for the Secretary of State to provide more funds for the counties. We are consistently asking them to do more, buy more, and we're not doing anything for them. We're not giving them any money, and every time we ask, it's said that the counties are responsible for the election. The counties are responsible, but the state is just hammering all these different requirements on them. And I just think it's the fact that we won't give them any more funding to run these elections. It's just not good business. I mean, we want to have fair elections. We want them to be honest. I want the same thing, but I don't think that it's fair to keep giving all these responsibilities and all these things that all these election workers have to figure out, but there's no more money for them.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I'll respond. We appreciate the concern, and we recognize that as elections become more challenging, we've had to expend more resources at the local level. The State Election Board has developed a mechanism and a process to receive resources from third parties and then to provide those resources back out to our local election officials. So those positions are in place, whether it's through federal dollars or through third-party private donations. So I want to make sure the committee understands that we are not banning the donation from individuals to support elections in Georgia. What we're doing is we're not allowing individuals to selectively fund certain communities at the expense of others. So it has to go through the state. As far as the allocation from the Secretary of State is concerned, I'm confident that he would appreciate additional resources, and I'm sure that our local election officials would as well.
And just a response to what you just said, during that time when that money was coming in here, it was those grants of Republicans and Democratic counties could apply for those funds. So I'm not really sure of the money that you keep saying that it was only given to certain people. The money that came in, the Arnold Schwarzenegger money, that any county could have applied. It's just that some counties elected not to.
I thank you. I appreciate the input. And you are correct. A number of counties, both in the metropolitan areas and across Georgia, did receive some grant funding. I believe in committee we heard a testimony that indicated that well over 90% of those funds went to particular communities and at the expense of others. So we had a large disparity in how the individual contributor chose to support elections in Georgia. What we would like to see is a fair and equitable distribution of funds across the state so that every voter in Georgia is supported at the same level and not some voters supported at a higher level at the expense of others.
Well, I have served on elections since I was elected, and so we're just going to have to agree to disagree.
I appreciate that, and we'll
You're
work
welcome.
together.
All right, we've got a lot of questions here. I'm going to move over to Representative Gullett.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple questions. One, like I said in subcommittee, HB 62 was my bill a few years ago, try to get private funds out of elections because as a small government, I believe in small government, and I do think that one of the roles of the government is to fund operations of elections. That's how it keeps it fair, keeps. I think that's just the role of government, and and I think what you're doing is I appreciate it. I think, am I even happy about us bringing in private funds to distribute equitably across the Secretary of State's office? I'm not sure that's still my favorite, but I can appreciate that, and I think there's a role for that, and this is a good way to do it. Really, the only way to do it, I think, as far as keeping it equitable. So thank you for the bill, and I think also just related to the new section that was added. This is doing is removing the Secretary of State's budgeting authority for the State Board of Elections to just have it as a separate entity within the budget itself. So I think that's all it's really doing. I don't think there's anything new related to that. I think the Secretary of State could do everything that this could do today. It's just a separate budget item, independent from the Secretary of State's office. So at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, we've got a motion. Do we have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Now time for discussion. Looks like we have some discussion over here, and we'll start with Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of things. I think we're all fairly familiar with our state budget process, and even under the best of circumstances, it's pretty rare that funds are distributed equitably statewide for anything. And those funds are under the control and direction of, a certain number of folks within the legislature, or the governor has influence and decision-making powers about federal dollars. So, I mean, I would like to think that there would be money that would be divided equitably and every county would get it, but that's really kind of not the way our budget has worked. And then the only other thing I'd like to say is that I don't know what kind of nefarious things we think have been going on, but to have 3 levels, 3 different entities that can do investigations of these election boards is kind of frightening. And I'm from Cobb, and we had audit after audit after audit after recount and whatever, and a lot of scrutiny. And I just, by the time the scrutiny and the recounting and the audits are all over, people are just a nervous wreck, and a lot of people are quitting. And I don't know why we need 3 entities to check into what these people are trying to do. They're just trying to do their jobs. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just to respond to a comment. The distribution of contributed funds is what I was referring to. It wasn't the distribution of state appropriated funds. The state appropriations process, as we know, works in a different path. But if a third party wished to contribute to Georgia's election processes, they would do that through the state election board with guidelines provided by the state election board, so that the third party could not uniquely identify the recipient. But the state election board would share those resources across Georgians to ensure that every Georgian had an equal opportunity to vote and to be supported in that process. The investigative issues are part of the substitute, and that's the will of the committee to determine how best to proceed. SB 202, actually SB 89, added the second option, which was the GBI's original jurisdiction. It has been very, very seldom used. The majority of investigations into election concerns currently are through the Secretary of State. And to Vice Chairman Gaines's point, he is correct. We could adjust the allocation of resources and not create new resources, but adjust allocation of resources and divide certain responsibilities. So the state election board would have investigative powers for some areas. Primarily, state election board would do election concerns. Secretary of State would do perhaps things that were not associated with election concerns. So while there might be some areas that would be unique, I would suggest that there would be a lot of areas that would overlap.
All right. Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator.
How are you?
I helped you on one. I'm going to have to.
I'm so happy.
First of all, I would just like to point out that this whole back section was not discussed in subcommittee, and it's a lot for us to try and review on the fly and not even hear from anybody in the public who might have comment on it. So I'm making an objection to that. Second, I'm going to make for the record the same objection that I made yesterday, which is the fact that this bill and having to return money 14 days after it becomes effective is on its face an ex post facto law, and it is void from its inception because it is unconstitutional under the United States Constitution to imply these laws. So I am making that objection again because I am so tired of us passing bills that we know on their face are going to require taxpayer dollars be put towards unnecessary litigation that could have been avoided. All right, then one other thing. So right now, the way this is written, this bill could create a situation where election officials will need to be concerned about a felony, pretty extreme felony. And like, I know people bring pizzas to the election workers, because they're tired and they're hardworking and they're not. Yeah. So, what about a generator to power the polling location? A private company that wants to voluntarily help on logistics and software. There's no reason to create these unintended consequences. So, I have a proposed amendment that would, I think, accomplish that and still not take away from what you're trying to accomplish. And at the appropriate time, I'll make that amendment. I'm struggling to even comment on the latter part. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I saw funding in the 2024 budget for the SEB, their investigators, and their appointment of an executive director. So I believe it's already been accounted for in the 2024 budget. Thank you.
All right, we have more discussion, and we'll move to leave. Representative Alalier, do you have a question? What number are you?
17.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. We are running our workforce into the ground. Like, we are doing this. We've sat through meeting after meeting, hearing after hearing. We heard from the Secretary of State himself. We've heard from department heads, state employees, local elected officials, volunteers, underpaid, understaffed. We're creating additional sets of responsibilities and redundancies that, from a business sense, make absolutely no sense. It doesn't help our bottom line. It doesn't improve the voter experience. It doesn't assist in voter integrity efforts. Senator, I'm trying to even make sense of the process itself. So if I write a grant and I receive the funds, does the local elected official write the grant? Does the Secretary of State write the grant? Who receives the monies? How are the monies and resources then allocated? I mentioned yesterday, I run a nonprofit. Writing grants, that's serious work. And so when we talk about our workforce and we talk about the important work that these women and men are leading every single day for our state, for our communities, no money, no support, no assistance, we can't be surprised when we see less than stellar results. And it's on our hands. We're doing it. And so I guess my question, Mr. Chair, for Senator Burns is, can you explain to me the grant process, who's allowed to write the grants to pull in the additional resources that our elected officials need to do their really difficult jobs? And then how is the money going to be dispersed to counties?
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate your input. The first question, if you look on lines 33 through 37 of the committee substitute, it specifically restricts county or municipal government or government employee or election official from soliciting, taking, or otherwise accepting, so that locals could not solicit third-party funds to run local elections, so that all funds have to be channeled through the state election board. The state election board has published a report in March. I have a copy of it. I'd be happy to share with the committee, that outlines the process by which it recommends handling third-party contributions. And to Representative Gullett's point, some would suggest that we should not accept any funds from third parties at any level. This bill does not restrict that. It restricts local accepting of funds, but it does not restrict state funds or federal funds. But at the local level, you would not solicit funds from third parties or accept them.
All right. Representative Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share, I think, some of the concerns that Representative Roberts voiced about the retroactive application, but I don't view it as quite as settled, I think, as she does, because this is dealing with local governments, which are political subdivisions of the state. So I'm not sure that actually local governments are entitled constitutionally to not retroactive application like citizens are. And I also believe that as the state government, we as a legislature have an ability to dictate to them rules under which they operate. And I think if we felt like a particular local government had acquired some asset or payment improperly or illegally, we could mandate that they disgorge it without it implicating a retroactive or ex post facto law. So I agree that that is an issue, but I don't think I possess the same degree of certainty about that, and I believe there's a good chance it would in fact be found to be appropriate and legal. And I think just given a concern I share, which I think is the author's concern, in that we as a legislature generally don't operate the elections. We do prescribe rules for them, and that may not be very fair in some cases, but that's the system we have, and local governments are obligated to pay for the elections. And we provide them as a legislature, I think, resources to levy and acquire funds to fund the elections that they operate, and they're provided some discretion, although we do try to maintain, I think, uniformity. I think that's kind of been the big goal of a lot of this legislation, is to maintain some degree of uniformity across the state, so that someone in Valdosta or someone in Elbert County or someone in Fulton has the same rules about when they vote and how they vote. You know, the locations are different. There may be some peculiarities that are different, but some of the basic general rules are the same. And it just seemed to me that despite the protestations that there was no partisanship, that everybody could apply, it sure seemed that a lot of that money went to certain jurisdictions, and conditions of those grants were that certain vendors be used that had traditionally not been completely disinterested in the outcome of elections. So I feel that I think it's inappropriate for a former Republican governor's group to be funding elections, and I think it's appropriate for people who might want other outcomes to be funding our elections. I think we need to be funding our elections. And that does, I think, prompt a conversation about how we're going to help them pay for it. But I think I would rather us move to that conversation than try to say, well, let's try to get all this private money that may not always be completely disinterested in the outcome of the election. So I appreciate the legislation.
I appreciate Representative's input and comment, and to Representative Roberts' concerns. I'm not an attorney, but with the expressed concerns that you had from our discussions yesterday, I did ask legal counsel to reconsider and make sure they were comfortable with that, and they've suggested, perhaps as Representative Leverett pointed out, that this is not a settled issue, but they feel comfortable that within this context it would be something that would be appropriate. So we'll ask that language remain in, and I would certainly acknowledge the fact that Representative Leverett has clearly articulated the concerns for third-party funding. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to take a couple more comments, and then we're going to move on to the vote. Representative Anulowicz.
Thank you. I have two questions. They're both about Section 2, so whoever is best equipped to answer that, I'm happy to take the answer from. One, does the Secretary of State's office know that in line 123, he's removed from the State Board of Elections? And if he does know, is he okay with that? That was in. Okay, so that's, so that's still in one, so that's, I'm a little bit confused about that.
SB 202, in its original form, removed the Secretary of State from being a member of the state.
Right, he's ex
board.
officio.
He's ex officio.
Right, and this removes that.
This removes his ex officio status. Is that correct? And I cannot speak. I have not had a conversation with the Secretary of State about this, so I don't know.
Has anyone had a conversation with the Secretary of State about this?
I have not. I think he's aware of it now, but I don't know that anyone's sat him down and gone through it.
Because that seems like a thing you tell someone.
He's not his status as a non-voting member is being taken away. I don't really feel like he had much. I think
Chairman Leverett. Chairman Leverett, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think the point's well taken, but I would say to the extent sort of the surprise happened, it would have happened a couple of years ago. This really isn't much of a change in status. If you're a non-voting member, you don't really have much input on that body, I don't think. You don't have much opportunity to influence it. And this would just free him up to do the other jobs that he has as in administering elections and further make the election board an independent body.
Yeah, so by that rationale, we have lots of ex officio members on our committees here in the House. They might appreciate being freed up also.
Well, usually they can vote.
Right. But
He can't.
My question was just, does he know? And the answer is, I guess he does now, but wasn't consulted with about this language.
I don't know. He had a whole lot of notice, no.
Okay. My next question, I know we said we'd circle back to this with the having 3 investigative authorities now. Is part of the motivation for this the fact that in October of 21, the GBI did not investigate claims that some folks wanted to have investigated because when they looked into it, they realized that there was no merit to those claims? Is this would this give the Board of Elections a backup in case the GBI didn't think there was any there?
I cannot speak to your concern. We've not had any conversations with the GBI about their investigations, and this again, if handled correctly, the amendment, if handled correctly, would not add a layer. It might separate.
Well, it adds another distinct investigative authority to their arsenal, as it were.
Again, depending on how Section 2 would be operationalized, the responsibilities for elections investigations would go with the State Election Board, perhaps, and other investigations would remain with the Secretary of State. And
but the GBI retains that investigative authority.
The GBI always has the overarching responsibility and authority of original jurisdiction. They've always had the authority to be invited by the local sheriff to come into a community and handle concerns that sheriff might have. This is really no more than the same responsibility that the GBI enjoys with gangs and drugs.
Right.
So that the GBI has some original jurisdiction responsibilities there. So this just expanded that original jurisdiction through SB 89 last cycle to give them that same authority and oversight and original jurisdiction for election violations. And again, I would acknowledge that has been very limited in its use, as it should be.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go back to Chairman Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I would add to that discussion is, and I can't speak for everyone who might be in favor of opposed to that, but the sense I got is there was some feeling that giving the GBI the authority that I voted to give it was viewed as a bit too intrusive. It was sort of an overkill.
So my understanding is they would get involved if there's a criminal referral or some kind of serious crime involved. The reason I think the board would want to have investigators is they might need to do investigations that didn't necessarily, at least when they started them, seem to have a criminal implication, but just were more of an administrative nature. You know, someone might need to be civilly fined or might need to be counseled not to do that, or they may need to have some kind of curative plan put in place not to do things that they may have done improperly, maybe perfectly innocently. So that's why they would have those investigators. So at least in my view, it's because there are times when you need to investigate things without anticipating some kind of criminal implication, and you don't want to bring the GBI in those cases, so you have administrative investigators handle that investigation. If they determine there was some kind of intentional act that would rise sufficiently to be a sufficient crime that would require GBI involvement, they can always make that referral. But that's why I understand the view that this was somewhat duplicative, but I think it's because they kind of have different roles in their investigative scope.
So they may refer it to the GBI, but they're not required to pass it off to the GBI.
That's my understanding. I mean, I think that's true of any administrative agency's administrative investigative staff. I mean, even if they're investigating you for a license, you know, if you apply for a certain license, they may just determine you're not eligible for the license, but they could determine there's no criminal intent on your part. They might, on the other hand, feel there was, and they could make a referral for that. So I think, I mean, that I would say is just my understanding of why the bill provides for an investigative staff for the board if it's going to be pulled away from Secretary of State.
Yep. So we're gonna move on. So I'm gonna go to let's see, Representative Bazemore, and then we'll go back to Representative Roberts for her proposed amendment, and then we'll vote on that, and then take a vote on the bill. Representative Bazemore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to revisit a question I asked yesterday. Hopefully, you may have an answer for it. We're talking a lot about the grant money and how, you know, you have to apply for it. And I asked the question, how long is that money going to be dispersed to the individuals asking for it in a timely fashion in order for them to have their election? Because, and that's important, because this bill is restricting any other monies from coming in. The other part of my question is there a mechanism in place to see how the funds were distributed also? Because I'm hearing a lot about how monies are going here, monies are going there. We need to know that whoever's sending this money is evenly distributing money also.
I appreciate the question. I appreciate the concerns. It would be the state election board's responsibility to operationalize the receipt and the distribution of funds. Their initial report in February of this year was not as detailed as it will have to become. So I can't answer the question of how long will it take to receive and then disperse funds. I do believe that the proposed process does include an evaluation of equitable distribution and also a report of where those funds came from and where those funds were dispersed to. But that's an opportunity for the state election board to weigh in on third-party resources that come to the state, and then the state in turn allocates those resources back out to the local election officials.
So just a follow-up question, because as my colleague said, it's quite difficult for some to apply for those grants and how long it takes. And yesterday we heard from a supporter that testified that said some counties are smaller than others and don't have the ability to apply for a grant. So there, you have not addressed the issues that I keep hearing, that the distribution will be equal if some don't have the ability to apply, don't know how.
I understand your concern, and I would have to ask our friends and appointees on the state election board to address those issues as they disperse funds appropriately.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Roberts, your amendment.
Thank you. I just have to make 2 points really quick. First of
Make them quick, please.
Okay. I respect Representative Leverett's interpretation, but the word illegal or inappropriate is really bothering me, because the Secretary of State's own training materials after 202 was filed said that the superintendents were prohibited from taking or accepting funding, grants, or gifts from any source other than the governing authority of the county or municipality, the state of Georgia, or the federal government. So I'm going to keep bowing up when I keep hearing that they did something illegal. And I would say having to return $1.5 million is going to make litigation worthwhile no matter what. So there will be impending litigation. I may file it before it's over. Okay, I don't want to charge the taxpayers for it, but I also don't think it's fair to do that. It's unconstitutional. But anyway, okay. So
you have an amendment.
Yeah, I do. I'm getting there right now. So where was it? I'm sorry. So many new pieces to this. Okay, to avoid what I was talking about, where you drop off pizza or you bring in a generator, as an in-kind thing, the suggestion is on 1E that
1E?
I'm
What
sorry.
line is this?
146.
I am so sorry, yes. Lines 44 through 46.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. After voting purposes, could we add or in-kind goods or services provided, and don't even put individuals, without take out by individuals and just put without remuneration, and then remove the value of $200, because it's going to be hard to, if somebody brings in a generator, who's going to argue if the power's out and somebody in the community says, let me bring you a generator, or pizza, depending on how big the precinct is. So it's just eliminating in-kind goods or services.
Could you state it clearly one more time?
Yes, sir. After voting purposes, it would say, or in-kind goods, or. Then after provided, we would mark out by individuals. And after remuneration, we would mark out the rest of that. So it would read, this code section shall not apply to the donation or use of locations for voting purposes or in-kind goods or services provided without I can't say that word.
Remuneration.
Thank you.
Senator Burns, would you like to comment to that before we proceed?
While I appreciate the representative's recommendation, the intent of this paragraph was to ensure that all donations came from individuals or organizations that had no remuneration and that had a nominal value of less than $200. Now, I would point out to the committee that that number at one time was $100 and it was doubled. So we've increased that. It is not intended to be restrictive. It's intended to ensure that it's not an influence on the outcome of the election. So while I appreciate the intent and while I appreciate the recommendation, I would ask that the committee continue with the original language.
All right, so we have a motion for a Roberts amendment. And do we have a second for that motion? We have a motion and a second for the Roberts amendment. We'll go ahead and vote on that. All in favor of the Roberts amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. No. All right, that amendment fails. Sure, we can do a visual. All in favor of the Roberts amendment, hold up your hand.
she She was reading her email.
All right. All opposed to the Roberts Amendment, raise your hand. All right. So it fails with a 6-8 vote. We'll move on if the committee would like to make a motion. We've already made a motion and a second. So we're in a posture to vote on the bill. The sub to Senate Bill 202. I'm sorry, 222. Getting tongue-tied. All right, so all in favor passage of the bill, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. No. All right, we'll do a visual vote. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, all opposed, raise your hand. All right, the measure passes. And I believe it's understood that Representative Gaines will...
Senator Gaines will carry the bill in the House. I appreciate that.
Representative Gaines. Representative Gaines.
Well, maybe you should be promoted, Representative, Chairman.
Right.
Actually, it would be a demotion, wouldn't it?
I
apologize.
So if we could keep a quorum here, we have one more bill that's been recommitted to us. I believe it'll be quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Burns. All right. Absolutely. Come on up, Senator Dugan. Molly's passing out your bill.
Okay.
And so you were in rules, and this was recommitted back to us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And
they want to make one small change.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if you look at the small change that they're talking about is on line 8. If you start after the word by on line 8 and strike the rest of section 1, and then on line 13, strike said chapter is further amended by, and continue on with revising subsection, that's the change.
All right. Go over that one more time for us, if you don't mind. I think everybody didn't have the bill in front of them, but just for clarification.
472407 Sierra.
Okay, yes. And we passed this bill out of this committee, I believe, with broad support. And
I think it was unanimous.
I believe it was. So if you'd start over with
yes,
with
I'd
the
be glad
changes.
to, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to give y'all.
Yes, that was good to get the early.
So look, if you would look at line 8, you see the word by. After the word by, strike the rest of that line, all of line 9, 10, and 11, and then on line 13, you would strike said chapter is further amended by, and then obviously you would need to restructure the sections.
All right, so would we still have a section 2? Or section 2 would
Section 2 would be, yeah.
Okay, got you. Mr. Morelli, are you understanding the intent here? All right.
We just took out, and some of y'all are going to say, why did you take out the definition? Which is why I have my emotional support person here with me.
All right, very good. Commissioner, if you'll introduce yourself on the microphone and then explain.
For those that I don't know personally, I'm Christopher Nunn. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs. We had no issues with the underlying substance, but the definition does create some problems as it codifies language that may impact other programs in the agency, specifically the Governor's Rural Workforce Housing Initiative that we're in the process of rolling out. As defined here, workforce housing is tied to attributes not of the housing stock, but instead of the households that occupy that housing, and as such, which is the case with all of our federal funds, but we would then be required to regulate the people who go into the housing. And I will tell you that that is both a regulatory and an administrative burden. Our recommendation is that our suggestion would be that you leave that definition to the local government that seeks to waive the requirements or the fees, the development impact fees that they have imposed upon themselves. So that's the simple recommendation and the issue with the definition, because it impacts some other programs.
All right. Thanks for that clarification. And got a couple of questions. We'll start with Representative Roberts. And just so the committee can be thinking about this. Somebody on the committee will need to offer this amendment, I believe is how this is going to work. But Representative Roberts.
Did GMA or ACCG, were they okay with this change? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they're still giving me the
Zapping.
finger.
Okay.
Representative Vanillowitz.
Yeah, that addresses my question also, because I was just doing the math in my head. I'm like, we could have almost 1,000 different definitions of workforce housing. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. Every community is different, but I just wanted to clarify that that could be the outcome. So, okay.
All right, looks like there's no more questions. All right, would you or anybody else on the committee like to? Okay, we'll move to pass first. Okay, then we'll do the amendment. So we got a motion and a second. Discussion. So now, if someone would want to offer the amendment, so Chairman Taylor offers to make the amendment that's proposed by the sponsor. We have a second. Our council has the amendment noted. And so let's vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. All right, now on to the full bill. All in favor of the amended bill, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. So the bill carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
members of the committee. We'll see y'all again in committee tomorrow, I'm sure.